Okay. Well, Emily, welcome back to the podcast to talk about your
You.
book, Christmas, the Season of Life and Light.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Emily and I were joking before the show that this book actually it came out last year, 2023. Um, and I think you and I went back and forth about scheduling an interview, and then Christmas came and went. Um, the book, and so now here we are in 2024. And the great thing about the church's liturgical cycle is that if we miss it one year, or if you have a great sermon idea and you just can't get to it,
Mhm.
chances are within about 12 months you're going to be able to come back to it.
That's right. It always comes back around.
Yeah, so
So
you
I'm
wrote
glad.
something that has a really good shelf life. So congratulations just on
Yeah.
that. Because
Thank you. Thank you.
so just to get things started, um, what made you want to write about Christmas?
Well, I mean, obviously there's the practical stuff of I found out there was a series happening and I was invited to consider writing one of the volumes. There's that stuff. And we already talked before the show that when I found out Fleming Rutledge was going to be part of the project, I immediately was willing to do whatever I needed to do to
Yeah.
join in. Um, but Christmas was especially attractive to me just because as a child, even in a non-Christian home, I just loved the season. It was my favorite time of year, and not so much because of the toys, although as a kid, of course, I loved the toys and stuff, but it was magical to me in a way that I couldn't quite put into words. And and so it had always resonated with me. And when the chance was offered to write something about it that's theologically and biblically rooted and also trying to be like personally relevant for people as they observe the season, I just thought this is a great place to take my theological training and my like preacher heart and bring them together into one volume.
That's amazing. And in the what I like, I mean, even just like in the back cover of it, like you pull no punches, I guess, when it comes to removing the sentimentality of Christmas. You write at the first Christmas, this is the one with the baby Jesus and his golden fleece diapers, right? That we kind of sentimentalize today. You write that God exchanged the glories of divinity for the vulnerability of human experience, uniting Himself to us in order to unite us to God. Can you talk a little bit about um, the God's initiative at Christmas versus the ways in which we try to um, control what happens at Christmas?
Yeah, well, I think that was one of the central, what I wanted to be one of the central themes of the book is
Mhm.
that this season, even though we've made it so much about lights and movies and gifts and all those things, which are fun and fine. I'm not condemning any of that stuff. But that what Christmas is really about is that God has come to us, that God has
Mm.
interrupted our life, our world, and declared, I'm saving things. I'm going to set things right. You have tried in all of these ways and failed, and it is my turn to speak. And when God does speak in this moment, he speaks not in the halls of power and not in the realm of Caesar, but he speaks within this backwater town in rural occupied Galilee. And I just think that's a powerful that is a powerful message in its own right, and we should let that speak for itself at Christmas.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? The the odd place that um where the incarnation takes place and how that um runs contrary to the ways in which we in the empire like to think of God originating from Constitution Avenue.
Yeah. Right, right. I mean, we definitely would not expect for God to show up in these places in a cave with, you know, peasant Jews in Roman occupied Palestine. But that's precisely what happens. And it's the Christmas stories as written in the Gospels, I think, intentionally highlight that contrast. That there was definitely an empire that proclaimed itself to be the peace bringers to the world. There was an emperor who thought of himself as the son of God, as Lord of all. And in the midst of that environment, God says, no. here is my son, and he's born to peasant Jews who are were it not for his life and death and resurrection, we would never have known existed. Like never have known existed. Mary and Joseph would have lived out their lives in total obscurity and died, and no one would have remembered their names. And yet it is them to whom God comes, and God entrusts himself to be brought up in this very frightening, unstable, violent world. And I don't know. I think that's a really relevant message all year round, but especially this time in our national life.
You talk, yeah. I mean, you talk about the year roundness. I mean, we have 12 days,
Hmm.
but within those 12 days, half of that's winter break from school, other half of that, it's traveling, it's doing all of it's often living up to the expectations that either others place on us for this time of year or the expectations that we place on ourselves.
Hmm.
How is it that um, what is a year potentially can be a year round celebration of God's Emmanuel being with us? How do we go from that to 12 days to baby Jesus is going to get 45 minutes on the 23rd, and if you could do it at 4:30, that'd be great because we have dinner reservations at 5:30 down the street.
Right. Yeah, I mean as you know, that is a long and complicated story. Um, I mean, we know from early on that there wasn't actually as much concern about the date of Jesus' birth early on, like the earliest days of the church. But by around the fourth century, there was this tradition that it was, somewhere around the 25th. And a lot of that has to do with the way they dated things back in the day and Jewish tradition. But nevertheless, what happened was that time of year also coincided with a time in the agricultural calendar in which everybody is resting after harvest. Everything is, all the animals have been slaughtered, and it's cold and dark, and there's not a whole lot to do. And so Christmas moved from, being one moment to a larger period of time, and eventually that gets like formalized. But the trouble for us, like you mentioned, is that we do it sort of the reverse, at least in the West. Christmas runs from like, I don't know, right after Halloween, like through the day of.
I mean, my
And
Costco had Christmas stuff up before Halloween.
yeah, I
I
mean
mean,
that's
and Costco drives, if you think Amazon drives everything, go to a Costco, and
for
that's
real,
really
for
what's
real.
driving America.
And then it stops, right? And December 26th is supposed to be all over. You take everything down. Whereas the church tradition at least has given us Advent, 4 weeks of looking to the future coming of Christ, and then from the 25th until January 6th, um, memorializing the coming of Christ in his first coming. And it's really hard to push back against the cultural like pull. It's really hard. Like you said, we're traveling, we are dealing with like the fog of when we're all on Christmas break or our kids are on break, and you don't really know what day it is anymore. And
Hmm.
everything dirty. When was the last time you had a shower? Like it's rough. And so it's hard to observe that time. It tends to go by really fast, and then it's over and we go right back to work again. Um, yeah, it's tough. I wish there were big picture things I could do to make it better, but I can at least give some tips in the book about how to maybe mark the season.
Hmm. You describe Christmas as a season of life and light. Can you unpack those two metaphors and what they reveal to us about the incarnation?
Yeah. So life, I think, requires us to acknowledge death. So the fact
Mm,
that Christmas is a season of life is in part, no, not in part, in whole, an answer to the death that reigns over the world. And that's why, again, I go back to Christmas is not a sentimental thing. This is a realization that we are under the reign of sin and death, and God has to do something to rescue us from it. And so, just as God created the world, God is recreating the world in Christ. And so, Christmas is the season that we mark the beginning of that recreation. And so, that's
mm.
why it's the season of life. And then as far as light, it's a similar thing here, right? That this is a